I hope you guys are doing good. In today's video, we are going to see how you can append multiple Excel and write the results into the final Excel. Before we actually see how to build it, let's run the process which I already built. The execution is now completed. Let's look at the output folder now. Before we see the output, let's also look at the input folder we have. So we have append Excel folder. So this is the first Excel which has 2 rows in it, and the second Excel which has 2 rows, third again with 2, and the fourth Excel which has 4 different rows, and all the 4 different Excels have the same header. So we are going to append the Excel which has the same data, and this also work when you have different columns as well. So we are going to append the data which has same columns in the different Excels. And now let's look at the output. So this is the output which has appended all the data from the given input Excel. Now let's go ahead and build it. And this is the activity which I have created already for this demo. We are going to use C# connector to achieve this. So let's first add the connector which is C#. So I renamed it to append Excel rows. The first step is to loop through the input folder to get the Excel, and I'm going to use get files under directory. So let's drag and drop this, and you have to provide the directory path which is nothing but our input path. Let's provide the path now, and you can use the shortcut to access files and folder which is present in your project folder. And I have given my input folder which is append Excel. And the second parameter which is search subdirectories. In case you have multiple subfolders in the root folder, you can enable this to true, and I don't have anything, so I let it false. And the next parameter which is file extension, and I want to get only the XLX file. And this is completed. Let's also look at the output. So you can see that we have all the files in the list. Next step is to loop through each file. So we'll use for each. You have to pass the list to the collection for the for each. So after we loop through, we have to read each Excel. If you want, you can also use your Excel connector, and I'm going to use the data reader one which is read from Excel. As my intention is to read and write the Excel, so data reader component itself is enough, so we'll use this. Next is to provide the file path which comes from the object of the for loop. So we have to pass this. In my case, all my input Excel have the same sheet which is sheet 1. Is first row header. So yes, my first row is header in my all Excel. So let's give true, and this is done. Maybe let's run this and see the execution. So this is completed, and you can view the data table. So it will give you the data table of the last data, because we are not previewing it every time. And also you can view the count to check the number of rows in the Excel. So as I said, this is the last Excel in the given folder. Comes the actual logic to write the C# code, for which go to the project folder. Under the global object, just right click on the C# connector and click on configure. So this is the editor window which has 2 different tabs, script and references. They have also given the sample script like how we should use them. So first let's get started with writing the references. So before writing the code, we'll understand what logic we are going to follow. The first step would be get the input Excel each time when the for loop runs. So you have to have a common result data table. So every time you read your Excel, you have to write all your data into the common table, which we call it as a result table. We are going to use 2 parameters, which is called source data table, and the result one which is called result data table or the output data table. So let's start declaring it. Use a reference called system.data, which we use when we are working with data tables. So next step is to declare your class, and now let's call the class name as append rows, and we'll declare our method. So we'll call it as an appended DT, which is appended data row, and we have to declare 2 data table, one which is source and the other one which is result data table. So we are going to write the logic, which is nothing but we have to loop through each rows from the given Excel. So for which I'm going to use this for each. We have to loop through each rows in the given input Excel. So which is nothing but the source DT. have to import each rows from the source dt to the result dt. So let's copy this. So we are going to use a method called import row, which is nothing but this row. So we have to import each row from the source dt and write the values to the result dt. And as a final step, we have to return the result dt. So let's return the dt. So our logic is done. Let's click on validate. Have some error. Let's correct it. And now we have an error that type or namespace name data table could not be found. So there is error in this data table. So I think it shouldn't be small t, it should be capital T. So let's try and click on validate. Add the references and check the error. Go to the reference tab, click on add reference, type data. You can choose the latest version, click on OK, and let's click on validate. So now we have another error. It says that system.xml.serialization is defined in an assembly which is not reference. It says that we must add a reference to assembly which is system.xml. Version should be 4. Now let's try adding it. It means that you are using a method or something which is related to this, so we should add it now. Let's add the same thing which it mentioned, which is system.xml of version 4. Let's click on OK and let's now validate it. And okay, now we have another error. So whenever it says that the error is type or namespace could not be, make sure you don't have any typo. So I think this R should be the capital one. So let's click on validate now. Okay, the code block is compiled successfully. In case you don't know what references to be added, you just write the code and click on validate. The error will automatically show you what kind of references you should add. So now we are done with coding and everything. Let's click on validate. So our logic is done. In order to execute it, you have to double click on the connector and you will be able to see its method in the object explorer. We have only one method for C# connector, which is execute. So let's drag and drop this. On top of this there is called setting. Just click on this where you have to select your classes and method. So now we have only one method and only one classes. You can select your method, and also by default you get few other methods which is like toString, get the hash code, type and equal. So we just select the method we need and click on OK. So as soon as you click on OK, you will be prompting with the input parameters you give. So currently we have source dt and result dt. This will give us the result. Okay, so this is how this C# parameter work, and also we are missing something in the logic. Let's take a look at now. We just get two parameter, which is the source dt and the result dt. Always the result dt should have the result of the previous execution. So click on OK, and whatever result we are getting, it should be given to the result dt, right? So we have to create a variable, go to the respective activity which is called demo, and we are going to create a local variable, which is right click on this and you can create a variable. So the variable is created. Let's rename it. We call it as local dt. Okay, we'll now map it to the variable. So this is mapped now, and we have to pass the source data, which is nothing but the data table from the given Excel. And the result dt always should be same as the local dt. To map it again, if you remember, in the output data table we should also have the column headers, which should add only once when the process is running. So we can add this only when the bot is executing for the very first time. So we'll just make a small change in the code. So we'll write the logic before we loop through the source data table. Logic is nothing but we should add the header only when the bot is running for the first time or whenever the result data table is empty. So obviously the result data table will be empty only when the bot is running for the very first time. So let's make this logic now. Let's add a condition that if result dt is empty, which is equals to null, we have to clone the source DT. So we are going to clone it using the clone method, which is source DT. We are going to clone it. Sorry. So the code is compiled successfully. I hope you guys can understand the logic now. When the bot runs for the second time, result table will have some data. It doesn't go into this loop directly. It can go to the for loop, and it has all the data table into the final table, which is result DT. So we have something called this local DT, right, which we declare to be null. So we have to declare this to be an empty data table, which we'll do by using a script component. So let's drag and drop the script component. So click on this, turn the script component better. I have already uploaded a detailed video on that. Sure, you also watch that video. And here we are going to declare a variable, which is like empty data table. We'll call it as empty DT as our new data table. So this is done now. Let's click on OK. We should pass this to the local DT. So we will pass the empty data table to the local DT. This should be before we loop through the Excel. Let's connect the port. Let's clear the log. The execution is completed now. Let's look at the result DT value now. So we can see all the values, including the header, first name, last name, all its value, which is the expected format. Let's click on OK, and as a final step we have to write it to the data table. And now let's provide the path, and the data is nothing but our local table. So we have to provide the file path, which is output.excel. So and now let's run the complete process. So this is done. Let's look at the output file. If you see, it has write all the values to the Excel in the sheet 1, including the headers. This is how, with the help of C# connector, we can append multiple Excels into a single Excel. And I hope you guys find this video helpful. In case, please like and subscribe to my channel. If you want me to discuss on any specific topic or component, please let me know in the comment section. I'll be creating a separate video on that. And thank you so much for watching this video till the end.